So the next scenario maneuver that we're going to run through here is going to be our engine shutdown or an engine failure scenario. At this point, we're going to be doing it in cruise, okay? So this scenario can be introduced to you in a number of ways, okay? Maybe it's a abnormal indication on the engine instruments, all right? Maybe the throttle lever slipped back accidentally, maybe a passenger moved it, or we just have no idea why and we've lost power on one of the engines. So we're just cruising along here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do a right engine this time. So we're going to go ahead and start reducing that right throttle back. My first instinct always, if I were to find myself in this scenario where an engine has lost power, is to maintain control of the aircraft, maintain directional control, okay? At which point, then I would advance both of my throttle levers to full. Now, in our simulated scenarios, obviously we're trying to practice an engine failure. So in this scenario, I'm just going to advance the left throttle. All right, so now that my left throttle is full, or at least near full, again, I'm trying to maintain control of the aircraft. I'm going to verify that the flaps are up, that the gear is up, okay? At this point, I would want to identify the dead engine. By doing so, I have a ton of left rudder pressure in here. So my right foot is on the ground, not really doing anything. At this point, I can identify by slapping that leg, okay? My right engine is likely the engine that's dead, okay? In a real scenario, then I would then come over to the right throttle and throttle lever, which would be in the forward position at this point, okay? At this point, I'm going to pull it back to idle and then push it forward again. And if I notice no change in asymmetrical thrust, no indication, the engine instrument panel, no feel in the aircraft, I've likely properly identified the correct engine. At that point, depending on the phase of flight we're in, we're either going to shut that engine down in an auto-feathering airplane like the DA42 to feather that prop, okay? In this scenario, we have altitude. We're at 7,500 feet. I've got one engine. I'm able to relatively hold my altitude. So in order to make myself a little more comfy, I could throw in a little left rudder to alleviate that pressure. I always encourage students, don't completely alleviate that pressure so that you don't lose identification of which engine is dead, right? I have this right foot still in the rudder, just a little less so I'm not wearing myself out too much, okay? At this point, I could run a checklist. The flow is going to take me through things to check things such as the crossfeed. I might throw the right engine into crossfeed to try and get the fuel over there. Check my circuit breakers over here, especially the engine circuit breakers. Okay, might swap the ECUs on the right engine here to see if that changes anything. Open the alternate air valve. That's all going to be found on the checklist among possibly some other things for you to check.
You pretty much got everything in the troubleshoot checklist. So if you're missing anything in your flow, you always have the checklist to back it up. And up at 7,000, above 7,000 feet, you have all this time, you have all this energy, you can easily pull out the checklist. But it's good to know the flow in case this happened a lot lower to the ground, like in the traffic pattern.
At that point, we'll say that none of these things helped us get the engine back running, okay? So I would want to move into engine shutdown. It's going to do a couple of things for me, all right? It's going to shut that engine down. It's going to feather that prop automatically, reducing the drag, and it's going to help us with that asymmetrical thrust, and the plane's going to be a little easier to fly, all right? So at this point, I always encourage students to re-identify, make sure you're shutting down the right engine. Right throttle lever is at idle. I'd come over to the right engine master, and I'd move it down into the off position. You're going to notice a huge, huge relief on that leg that you have pinned into the rudder, and the plane is actually incredibly maneuverable with one engine as long as you keep the airspeed up. Okay, so we can do many things here. We can even bank into the dead engine as we talk, as long as the airspeed's up. We preferably want to bank into our working engine though, if at all possible. So at this point, I have the engine shut down. I would go to the nearest airport. Okay, probably Gateway, long runway, many services. They can help us out over there. I'm going to start heading that way and try to hold this altitude as long as I possibly can. Declare an emergency, all of your normal things from there.
So we can double check the engine securing procedure, power lever, engine master, alternator. I mean, but we're going to restart the engine, fuel selector, and power lever. I mean, everything's set.
Okay, now in a real life scenario, we lose an engine and we decide to shut it down. We're probably not going to go ahead and restart that engine. So I'd like to draw a very distinct line here between what we would do in a real life scenario and what we're going to do, because obviously we're training, you're going to be on a check ride, we have to restart the engine to fly back to the airport. So at that point, what I want to do is start reducing my speed. Really what I want to do is get it below 90 knots, kind of towards blue line, to slow down my airspeed. My right throttle lever is confirmed to be at idle. All right, so now what I'm doing, I'm just kind of leaving the throttle where it's at here on the left side. We're increasing altitude by pitching up and dropping this airspeed. Once we come below about 90 knots and we're approaching blue line, I can come over to this right engine master. I'm going to quickly turn it on, quickly turn the key. We're just going to go ahead and fire my right propeller. Right engine is back. Get out some of that rudder trim. Bring these throttle levers back even. Return to cruise flight. Get centered up. Adjust my rudder trim. Adjust the throttle levers. Get back comfortable. And now we're ready to move on.
And the important thing here too is that there's no altitude constraint. Just in case anybody's wondering, you are just trying to maintain directional control of the airplane and have positive airspeed here. If you lose a couple hundred feet while you're restarting an engine and you're up at 7,000 feet, it's not a big deal and you're not going to bust a check ride for that. There's nothing in ACS that says you have to maintain your altitude during an engine restart.
A lot of people are concerned about that. I mean, it's a common thing that you know, we want to hold altitude, right, the best we can, but we don't want to hold altitude at the expense of airspeed, right? As we approach blue line, the airplane's going to become increasingly harder to control. And while you're trying to, you know, solve all these problems, while you're looking at your checklist, you're doing all these things, you really want to keep that energy up in the aircraft so that you're not threatening getting yourself into a bad situation.
And most multi-engine trainer airplanes, or just multi-engine airplanes in general, don't perform as well in one engine as the DA42 does. So you might go and fly into Seminole, and you probably, at blue line, won't be able to maintain altitude at 7,500 feet, especially in the summer. So it's okay if you lose a little bit of altitude, as long as you don't sacrifice your airspeed. Then once you get that second engine back, then you can start focusing on it.